and the moderator of this event this evening. But first, I want to acknowledge the event sponsors, without whom this event could not be possible. Amen? All right, so round of applause for Roland Martin, Unfiltered Digital, Daily Digital Show, Fortune School, National Action Network, Sacramento chapter, yes, Philadelphia Church of God in Christ, National Coalition of 100 Black Women, Greater Sacramento Urban League, Sacramento Black Chamber of Commerce, St. Paul Missionary Baptist Church, my sorors of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, the Ice Cold Brothers of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, Cultural Hub, Hawk, Green Tech, California Charter Schools Association, Valley Redemptive Church, National Council of Negro Women, and Elite Public Schools. Round of applause for all of our sponsors this evening. You know, we show up and show out when we sponsor. I love that. I love that supportive community. Now, I want to introduce you to this man. His name is Roland Martin. You may have seen him on CNN. You may have seen him on BET. You may have seen him on TV One. You may have heard him on your radio. He is pervasive. He is all over, and he is very intelligent. So he is the reason that we're having this town hall this evening. Over the course of a journalistic career that has seen him interview multiple U.S. presidents, to top athletes and entertainers in Hollywood, Roland Martin is a journalist who always has maintained a clear sense of his calling in this world. Mr. Martin is the host and managing editor of Roland Martin Unfiltered. Follow that hashtag. It's the first daily online show in history that is focused on news, the analysis of politics, entertainment, sports, and cultural aspects from the African American perspective. The first to take care of all of that from the eyes of African Americans. Yes, yes. Since 2008, Mr. Martin has been a senior analyst for the Tom Joyner Morning Show, Tom Joyner, where his daily segment is heard on more than 100 stations and 8 million people every single day. Mr. Martin has also been awarded the 2008 President's Award by the National Association of Black Journalists for his work in multiple media platforms, and in that same year, he was also inducted into the Texas A&M University Journalism Hall of Honor. He is also a 4-time NAACP Image Award winner, including named Best Host for the last 2 years. So that's 4 Image Awards. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes. Mr. Martin is also a life member of the National Association of Black Journalists and a life member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Yes. He is also married to his queen, Dr. Jackie Hood Martin. She is the author of Fulfilled, The Art and Joy of Balanced Living, as well as Wedded Bliss. It's a 52-week devotional to balanced living, and the children's series, Hannah's Heart. Now, what we love the most about Roland Martin is his intelligence, his wit, his integrity, and the fact that he has maintained his walk as a Christian man throughout this entire journey, right? Right? Amen. Yes. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Mr. Roland Martin.
All right, so how are we doing? Good, good. Sorry, I'm a little late. I was tonight on PBS, Stanley Nelson's new documentary called Boss, detailing the history of black entrepreneurship, premieres tonight all across the country. And so it'll be here in a couple of hours. But I was live tweeting on the East Coast. In fact, Stanley had asked me to do that before Margaret had called me, and so I was like, okay, I got to do this already. So I said, we got to push this back an hour. I've already given Stanley my word, and then he talks about, of course, the history of African Americans coming out of slavery and all the entrepreneurs that we've had over the years in terms of building black businesses. And so it's an amazing documentary, and so when we get out of here, you definitely want to be able to watch it because you'll learn things that you maybe did not know about. And then you can go back and look at the hashtag BossPBS to see all the comments that we were making. And the reason I think these things are connected It's because part of the problem for me, and we've talked about this whole idea, even when we created school choice is the black choice, there were people who were saying, well, why are you doing this? Charter schools are bad and it should be all about public education. And most folks really have no understanding of our history, first and foremost. And so also you're going to have some homework. So what's going to happen is throughout this conversation, I'm going to be throwing stuff out. So you're going to probably write some stuff down, what books you need to go read and resources. That's how I always do it. And one of the books that's critically important is called The Education of Blacks in the South, 1860 to 1935 by James D. Anderson. How many people saw Henry Louis Skipgate's series Reconstruction? Well, if you saw that, if you actually read Education of Blacks in the South, taxpayer-funded education did not exist in the South until after slavery. It wasn't until African Americans got into the state legislatures in South Carolina, in North Carolina, all across the South, and actually put it in the state constitution. And so when you go through the South today, and even in fact in many northern states, they were impacted by what black folks did in the South. And so taxpayer-funded education was created by black people, because African Americans, free slaves, understood the value of education, because they figured out that if you want to kill me because I can learn how to read, it must be something powerful about reading that I need to know about. And the reason that's important is because when you talk about this notion of choice, black folks created schools because we had no choice. And what has happened is, and also this whole idea that black people don't care about education is nonsense, because what Anderson's research shows, and you read that particular book, that even in Memphis, 92% of all black kids were in public schools, when just 40% of white kids in Washington, D.C. were in public schools. Freed slaves understood the value of education. Black people have understood the value of education since the beginning. The difference has been what kind of education we have been receiving. And so this also is important, because when I travel around the country talking about choice, literally people come up to me and they say, I don't understand how you can be so pro-black and you can support charter schools. I say, well, first of all, if you understand the concept, you first control the curriculum. That's first. So black people talk about we need more black history in our schools. Well, you control the curriculum, more black history. And then they say, well, we need to have more arts and dance and band. Well, you control the curriculum, you got more arts and dance and band. Second thing is you control the resources. You control who gets the contracts, janitorial contracts, textbook contracts, IT contracts. So that means that not only do you control the education of our children, you control the economics of our neighborhoods, and you control the curriculum. You control those three things, then that's what it means to have power. And so many people are walking around misinformed about exactly what this is all about. And so we have been traveling around the country. We've been in multiple cities. We started this tour in Indianapolis, in Philadelphia, Indianapolis, in Atlanta. But for the last several years, I've traveled around the country with Kevin Johnson and Michelle Reed. And we've been to Tulsa, Charleston, South Carolina, Atlanta. We've been to Chicago, Nashville. We've been to Memphis, and all these places, because what I cannot tolerate are black folks who are walking around spinning stories and nonsense that somebody else told them, as opposed to the actual facts. Now, I'm going to say this right now, so let me be real clear. My sister is a teacher. Both of my sisters are teachers. One was a teacher's aide. My brother also taught. My uncle was a teacher. I have numerous educators in my family, and so I don't play that game also where it's attack teachers. But let me be clear. Here's what I don't like. I don't like bad teachers, bad principals, bad school administrators, bad politicians over schools, and I don't like bad parents. So I think we covered everybody bad, because we have to be real honest. And tonight is about being honest. But also, here's what I don't like. I don't like bad charter schools. I don't like bad traditional schools. I don't believe in the concept of charters. I believe in high quality education where our kids are getting educated. The charlatans that are in this industry, I want thrown out. I don't want people in this industry who have 2 schools and paying themselves $400,000, and they can't buy textbooks. And so part of this national initiative is not just to talk about charter schools, but it's also to empower communities to say, how can communities create more charter schools that are built from the ground up, high quality from the beginning, meaning strong curriculum, strong finances, strong boards, and strong leadership. And so it's also why we are doing this. And so I just want you to understand what is happening across the country. So this wasn't just something that, oh, let's just pop in and have this event. When Margaret called a couple of weeks ago, we said, hey, we can do this, and we'll talk about the bill that's before the state legislature. Because what you also, and let me also be real clear, that one of the greatest detriments as far as I'm concerned across this country is to see black state legislators, black city council members, black county commissioners, African Americans who are in Congress, who are some of the most ardent opponents of charter schools, yet they are representing constituents who have some of the worst academic records in this nation. That, to me, is an abomination. You cannot be a legislator with schools in your places where 70, 80, and 90, and nearly 100% of black kids are not reading on grade level, don't have math scores on grade level, and yet you're blocking another way for them to be educated, yet they're the same people who are sending their kids to private schools. So I'm going to say this before I introduce. If you meet any state legislator and they oppose charter schools, ask them where they send their kids. Because if they don't send their kids to public school, then you say, oh, you got your kid in a private school, but you want all of our kids to go to the same schools that have been failing. And trust me, that's going to have a different conversation. And I have no problem fronting people. I ain't got no problem. Look, I got a simple philosophy. If you black, you white, Latino, don't matter. If you do good, I'm going to talk about you. If you do bad, I'm going to talk about you. At the end of the day, I will talk about you. And that's just one of the things that we have seen, and I think all across the country. And so we're going to take your questions. We're going to have some great insight. We want panelists. You can jump in with your thoughts. If it get a little heated, it's okay. I know how to cut people off and shut them down. Don't worry about that. And again, anybody in the audience, if you act a fool, I will shut you down too. So I'm just warning you ahead of time. Don't think this is my first rodeo. I have seen it all, and this will not be the first time. First and foremost, we're going to introduce our panelists. Start from this side, going all the way down, tell them what's your name, who you are, and what you do.
My name is Margaret Fortune. I'm the president and CEO of Fortune School, which is a network. Which is a network of public charter schools designed to close 7, designed to close the African American achievement gap by preparing kids for college starting in kindergarten.
Cool.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Larry Lee. I'm a publisher and CEO of the Sacramento Observer newspaper. Thank you. Yes, sir. The Observer has been publishing here in Sacramento for 56 years and are one of the charter. We are the charter publication with Fortune School on their efforts. Happy to be here.
My name is Hazel Mahone, and I'm professor. I'm professor emeritus at California State University, Sacramento, and I also run a college prep math and reading academy where I take kindergarten now through 8th grade students to the university because they are behind in their reading and math, and we want them to get used to going to college. So we have our classes right on the college campus.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ramel Antoine. I get to work as the Director of Regulatory Affairs for the California Charter Schools Association. All that basically means is I get to help the rulemakers who decide educational policy remember to play fair and to remember that charter schools are public schools.
And I am Dr. Takori Porter, pastor of the Genesis Church in South Sacramento, and also the president of the National Action Network chapter here. founded by Reverend Al Sharpton. I'm glad to be here.
All right. Also, we're live streaming as well, so we are streaming this on my Facebook, YouTube, and Periscope channel, so you can share that with folks if they want to see what's going on. Somebody can't make it, they can actually watch the stream. So let's start this way. First of all, I want to start with you. You said something critical. You said charters are public schools.
That's right.
It is amazing to me, everywhere I go around the country, there's this debate between public schools and charter schools, and I'm going, idiot, it's the same thing. It's sort of like all these white people walking around saying, I can't stand Obamacare, but don't mess with my Affordable Care Act. It's the same thing. So again, talk about that. And so here, what's the control? How does it work in terms of charter schools and traditional public school system?
Yeah, so charter schools get public funding, but they have their own boards, right? So they have their own nonprofit board that helps to oversee what happens at the school, and so that is really what happens. But in exchange for that freedom, or for that funding, they get to have freedom over their curriculum, over all the day-to-day operations, all the things that Roland talked about in the beginning. Those board meetings are open and public to everyone who wants to be there, and people can have a say in what happens at that school because, again, it is a public school where everyone can go, where everyone who wants to go can have an opportunity to go, right? So in any charter school, they have a certain amount of seats, and so if 100 seats, let's say, and 101 students want to go, there's a public lottery. That lottery is open and transparent. And
it's for all 100.
All 100.
All right.
Yep.
So it's not like, okay, because again, one of the things we hear, you cherry pick, you pick the best students. The way it works is it's literally a lottery system. You don't have a control over who wins those slots.
Correct. Yep. And so that is the part of the oversight. And then additionally, they're accountable to the public. So you talked a little bit about accountability, and I wanted to just really touch base on that really quickly. Charter schools, every 5 years, have to prove their worth, have to prove their academics, have to prove that they're fiscally solvent, have to prove that they're meeting their community promise. And if they're unable to, then ultimately they have to close. And that is
so 5 years. So let's say you go 5 years and you're not hitting those benchmarks. What happens?
Your school has to close.
Meaning you're out of business.
You're out of business, yeah.
Now, but you have traditional schools that can go 20 years.
Yes, sir. Yep.
And they're still in business.
Yep.
Again, and the reason that's important because that's one of the lies that trust me, everywhere around the country, people go, oh, there's no accountability. They can just do whatever they want. And I'm going, yeah, but that school, we know they've sucked for 30 years and they're still in operation. And it's this whole game that's actually played there. So we got in terms of the issue, in terms of how that works, and accountability, Mark, you, in terms of where do we stand now? What is happening legislatively in this state when it comes to charters? We saw there was a strike in Los Angeles that was eventually settled. That strike really was about charter schools. There was a strike of teachers in West Virginia. A huge part of that was about charter schools. What you have is you have people across the country who all of a sudden want to make charters the enemy. By the way, how many kids in America, you can guess, attend charter schools? Somebody said, what did you say, 80? 8%. That's way too high.
Yeah, probably something like 3%.
No, it's not. No, seriously. 3%, 10%. It's really 3 million kids. 3 million kids go to charter schools. About, 4 or 5, it varies right now. So here's what it gets me. How can 4 to 5% of the kids be the problem for the other 95? I'm still trying to figure that one out. And that really just boggles my mind how this thing has turned into that charter schools are the bane of traditional public existence when they don't even comprise 10% of all students in America. That's the craziest thing in the world.
That's right. And if you look at California, charter school students represent 10% of the student enrollment, so 660,000 students. But there are 6.6 million students in California public schools. So 90% of the students...
See, you move way too fast. See, I need you to walk through that real slow. So in the state of California...
That's right.
Charter students make up how many students?
660,000 students.
And how many total kids in California are in public schools?
6.6 million.
So 90% of all kids in this state go to traditional public schools.
That is correct.
But charters are the problem.
Right. Doesn't add up, does it? So you asked me about what's happening in California's legislature, and there are a slew of bills in the 1500 series: Assembly Bill 1505, Assembly Bill 1506, and Assembly Bill 1507 that have passed their first policy hearing. And together, those bills would basically shut down charter schools in California because they amount to a very tight cap. That's what Assemblymember Kevin McCarty has authored in AB 1506. It also takes away appeal rights for charter schools. That's AB 1505 by Patrick O'Donnell out of Long Beach. And in addition, in O'Donnell's bill, it says that a school district could say no to a charter school petitioner if they find that the charter school will cost the district money. Well, current law says that the number one consideration for charter schools is academic achievement.
Right. Not money.
Not money,
which means
academic
kids
achievement.
failing.
That's right. So in California, for example, black students are the lowest performing subgroup other than students with disabilities, students with special needs.
So there's students with special needs and black kids.
And then there's everybody else. Black kids get suspended at 3 times the rate of white kids, and the studies show that oftentimes it's for the same behaviors. The system just reacts differently to African American children. And so charter schools have been a way within the public school system for families, African American families and all families, to have choice. But it's particularly important for African American families because the district-run schools have so underserved black students, and unless you're a data denier, the data is irrefutable that that's the case. And yet in the state of California, black kids are not actually considered a high-needs group under law. So, you know, it's interesting that black people can even be oppressed in a blue state. By the people.
Oh, y'all can clap on that one. Y'all can clap on that one.
And in my view, there's nowhere is it more obvious than in policing and in public schools. And so to tell black families that school districts can make a decision based on the money about whether or not a school that is designed to close the African American achievement gap, for example, can exist based on the finances of the school, and then to make that school district's word final and say there are no appeal rights, there's no due process, is really counter to our system of democracy. We give people who we suspect of crimes due process. Why wouldn't you give educators who want to educate black students to a level of excellence due process? And the tragedy and what I think could negatively impact black families for generations to come is to say that you have no choice and we're going to force you back into the district-run schools that underperformed you in the first place.
Right.
I think it's a huge assumption to say that if you shut down charter schools, this 10% of the public school population would go back to the district-run schools. It's not just black families. There's a diversity of families that have said, I want to be in a public school, tuition-free, but I want to choose. But our families are particularly impacted by that because of the crisis that's happening in district-run schools.
But also economically, for black folks, we can't pack up and move.
Right.
I mean, look, the reality is not if you are a person of means, and there are some African Americans who are people of means, they can pack up and they can move to a better school district. For the most part, our folks can't pack up and move. We're, in essence, stuck in those same schools. And then when you talk about a charter coming in, that's focused on, again, educating our children. It's about giving them those parents those particular options as well. What is the response from, because last time I was here, I actually spoke to, well, the previous time, to the Black Caucus here. What is the response of the Black Caucus? What are they saying? What are they doing?
So I have to take my hat off to Dr. Shirley Weber.
That's right.
Just the mention of her name elicits applause because she is the current president of the California Legislative Black Caucus. And Dr. Weber has a background having been a school board member. She has authored legislation that is sponsored by the California Charter Schools Association to add black students to the local control funding formula and acknowledge them as a high needs group. Now, the current state of the legislature tells you why it's not enough to have the Black Caucus, because Patrick O'Donnell, the chair of the Assembly Education Committee, just denied her bill a hearing outright. It was supposed to be heard tomorrow, and now it's not going to be heard at all. Now,
What's his name?
His name is Patrick O'Donnell, and he's the chair of the Assembly Education Committee.
O'Donnell.
O'Donnell, that's right.
Okay.
So there are some members of the caucus, like Shirley Weber, who's supportive of charter schools, like Senator Bradford, who represents Southern California, Inglewood, who's supportive of charter schools. But there are other members of the Black Caucus, and Kevin McCarty is an example, who we are in his assembly district today, who is authoring a charter cap bill. And we had an opportunity, many of the members of the panel here today had an opportunity to meet with Mr. McCarty to ask him what gives. And the number one concern that he expressed to us again and again was about the money. He was concerned about the fact that, you bring up the teachers' union strikes, the LA. He was concerned about the fact that districts are not able to balance their budgets, and therefore that we need to have more students in the traditional public schools so that they can balance their budget.
Now let's stop right there.
Yeah.
Let's stop right there. Again, so this is where we're gonna unpack this thing for a bit. Now, and anyone can jump in, but Margaret, I want you to definitely speak to this. First and foremost, it is not the district's money.
Right.
That's right.
The money is allocated per pupil.
That's right.
The money is actually your tax dollars.
That's right.
It's not the district. Second, what's the number in California? How much is assigned per pupil? What's the
$11,000 to $12,000 per pupil.
So 11 to 12,000. Fact of the matter is, 11 to 12,000 is not actually spent per pupil.
Correct.
Right.
So really, when he says to fund the district, it's actually to fund buildings, administrators, pensions, and all those things,
There you go.
not actual education.
That's right.
Go ahead.
And it, if you look at the district where we are, the school district where we are, which is the Sac City Unified School District, it's anticipated that they're going to run out of money and be bankrupt by November. But the district only has 11 direct funded charter schools. So it's not reasonable to think that...
Hold up, they have 11 direct run charter schools, and how many traditional schools?
Well, they have over, I think, 50,000 students. So, to give...
So how many kids in the 11 charter schools?
I would say about 5,000 tops.
So the 5,000 kids are the reason they about to be broke?
Yeah, right. So the county Office of Education. You see what we're dealing with here in California, Roland. But the county Office of Education has responsibility for certifying district budgets and being honest about the state of district budgets. And what they've said is that what is actually in excess of what this particular school district can afford, and it's not uncommon to the districts, LA, Oakland, the pension costs exceed that which the district can afford. The health care costs are higher than they can afford, and they've made multi-year compensation package deals that is beyond which the district can afford.
Now, three things you mentioned have absolutely nothing to do with the education of the child.
That's right.
Just so we're clear. Go ahead.
So charter schools make a convenient scapegoat, and why is that? I've talked about the legislators who are authoring these bills, but I haven't talked about the entity that is sponsoring them. and they are sponsored by the California Teachers Association, who I really think have used these teacher strikes, particularly in Los Angeles and in Oakland, to shoehorn in this set of bills into the legislature to oppose charter schools, which is something they never supported in the first place. So undoubtedly the politics.
Even though the American Federation of Teachers has a charter school in New York, they actually run a charter school.
And charter schools were the brainchild of the teachers' unions, because they originally thought that what would happen would be that teachers would be empowered to develop their own schools and not be burdened by administration. And so that's why in California's charter school law, it says that you can start a school through having half the teachers who intend to work at the school put forth a petition, or half the parents is another route to chartering. Right. My schools, we have gone with half of the parents. But there's also that flexibility for teachers to decide to charter their own schools. So the thing is that this is big politics. And I heard...
Not education.
Yeah.
Right. Politics.
This is politics. And the most powerful lobby in California is the California Teachers Association. And so it's not surprising that in a blue legislature, and I speak as a Democrat, that a set of legislators backed by the California Teachers Association will be putting forward these bills to shut down what they view as competition within public education. But the thing is, it's like, do you have to control the whole thing when you've already got 90%?
Oh, no, but here's my whole deal. If you were handling your business, there would be no choice.
That's right.
Right.
So if you're not handling your business, I mean, again, that's sort of how we have to sort of attack this. But I want to go back here. So, okay, so who's the cat's district we're in? What's his name?
Kevin McCarty.
Kevin, say it again?
McCarty.
Kevin McCarty. Okay. So who has the stats on black education in his district?
I do.
Because again, and here's, follow me why this is important. When Kevin Johnson and Michelle Reed, when we were in Atlanta, what Kevin did was we put up the grades. So typically we said, what are the two black high schools? Typically in most areas, two black high schools. Then you have 4 middle schools. Then you have 8 elementary schools, and they all feed into one another. And so we put on the wall, we showed the 8 elementary schools and the grades of the 8 black elementary schools, and they all were Fs. Then we showed the 4 middle schools. They were all Fs. Then we showed the 2 high schools. They were all Fs. And for the first time, a lot of the black people in the room had never, ever seen with their own eyes that their children were going to F schools from K all the way through 12. When we were in Selma, same thing, Alabama Education Association. It was a brother who was on, I mean, he was just like hot. They fought the charter bill in Alabama, and he was just upset. And he was a fellow fraternity brother of mine. He was an alpha. And he was just mad because we were having this discussion. I had a sister who was on the panel who was the first black female athletic director of a Division I program. And this is what she said. She said, Selma, your grades are so bad that I would not authorize my scouts to come recruit your athletes because I know they can't meet the NCAA academic requirements.
Wow.
So as we were sitting in there, he said, the answer is full funding. And I said, have you ever been fully funded? He said, yes. I said, when? He said, 2009. I said, okay, great. I said, what were your proficiency rates when you were fully funded? He says, well, the higher they are than they are now. I said, that's not an answer. So we went back and forth for about 10 minutes. And finally, there was a sister who was in the audience on that side of the church. She said, I got it. So she pulled up on her phone. And she read it off. And she said that the year they were fully funded, the proficiency rates for black kids in the state was 4.63%.
Wow.
And mind you, 90% of the people in the room walked through the church doors opposing charter schools. They heard 4.63%. I said to the brother, that means 95.5% 99.37% of black kids are not reading on grade level. You heard a collective gasp in the room, and the whole room flipped. The sister who was on the panel, who was the most ardent charter opponent on the State Board of Education, left that. She said, her final comment, she says, clearly the information that I was given is different from the stuff you have. I need to go back and reconsider my position. Because they cannot counter the numbers. They want to talk in these very highfalutin ways, but you have to hit them with the numbers. So, what's the numbers?
So in mathematics for African American students in Natomas, the proficiency rate is 15%.
Now, is that all students? Is that elementary? Is that what? So, what is that?
All students.
All students
All
in
students in mathematics in
this-
2017-18.
in this area.
That's in Natomas, and now we'll go to Sac City Unified. That's the district that we're sitting in now. The proficiency rate in mathematics for African Americans is 13%.
So mathematics for all black, 13%.
13%. And if you look at the 3-year trend, it's from 2015-16 school year to the 2017-18 school year, the change has been a -2.
So it was 15 and went down to 13.
Worse.
That's right. That's right. And what's the typical performance for African American students in the state is 20%.
So in the state of California, black students on average are at 20%, but in his area, it's 13%,
That is correct.
meaning 87% of black kids here are not proficient in math.
Mathematics.
What about reading?
All right, let's go to English language arts, looking at African American students.
And y'all need to be
And-
writing this down so when
Okay.
y'all roll up on him in the grocery store, you should be able to say, and I know we in church, but you can go ahead and bless him accordingly. How the hell you supporting 87% failure?
So in English language arts, for Sacramento City Unified, 22% of African American students are at grade level.
So math was 13, English is 22.
Is 22%.
Got anything else for us?
This is nothing to write home about. For the state of California in ELA, black students are at 32% proficiency
In English language arts.
in English
So
language arts.
32 in the state of California, but right here, 22.
That is correct.
So the guy who is sponsoring the bill
That there ought to be a cap.
to cap charter schools represents an area that is below the state average, which is not anything exciting when you talk about 32 and 22%, which still means 67% of black kids in the whole state are not proficient.
That's correct.
Not just that.
Go ahead.
Not just that. In this district, so there's only about 10 primarily African-American schools in the state of California that have better numbers than these. 3 of them are charter schools in this district. In Kevin McCarty's district, 3 of them are charter schools.
Hold up. I want you to repeat that.
Right.
Then I want you to name those 3. Here's, again, because, and why I'm doing this is, just so you understand, the reason we can't move the ball because we do not have the information.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And when you have the information, that's why I never got beat in debating on CNN, because I always knew more than they did. That's how you win arguments, when you have the information. So, say it again.
So there's only 10 schools throughout the state of California that are predominantly African-American students that have African-American students performing at higher levels. And those 3 of them are here in this
Three of the
district.
10 in the whole state
Are here in this district.
in this district,
In this district.
and they're charter schools.
They are charter schools.
And who run those charter schools?
Fortune School. Oak Park Prep. And St. Hope Public Schools.
Okay. Oak Park Prep, is that a black-run charter school?
Yeah, well, that's St. Hope. That's through the St. Hope system.
Right, but they black-run.
Yes.
See, I'm here for black-run stuff.
Kevin Johnson.
Kevin Johnson.
Kevin Johnson.
Kevin Johnson. I'm just because there's some people, they got black principles, but they ain't black-run. Row here for a black run. Yeah, it's called school choice is the black choice. Just so y'all confused. So out of the 10 in the state, 3 are here.
Correct.
Okay.
In Kevin McCarty's district.
In his district.
And just to add a little bit of color to that,
It's lots of color, but go ahead.
Just the color. Yeah. So for charter schools in Sac City, African American students are performing better than the district schools, right? So to add on to Margaret's numbers, the charter school African American students in charter schools are performing at 20% in math, proficient or exceeded, right? That's over the 13% that Margaret talked about. And then for English language arts and math, 31%, as opposed to the
22.
To 22.
So the black kids here are doing better in charter schools, but in his district, but the dude who wants to cap the schools is ignoring those stats.
But keep in mind, I think, and Margaret brought up a point in that some of us met with Kevin McCarty a few weeks ago in regards to this issue, because we were very concerned about this. And I think, you know, the most alarming thing, as she mentioned, was the narrative was never anything about performance. It's strictly about money.
Right.
And
because they don't want it to be a performance conversation.
Of course not. But I think, and you're in media, and you know this, the challenge is they're trying to control the narrative. They're trying to change the fact that they have done these terrible deals across the board, mostly administratively, and they're trying to find a way to put somebody on the hook for that.
Yep.
And what they're doing is putting their arms around something like this that has absolutely nothing to do with the performance of our children. And so as they continue to do that, as you say, we get misinformed and we get attached to legacy relationships with unions and the like. And I understand the impact that has had for African Americans individually throughout the state. But when we talk about collectively and looking at the fact that their real concern is that you've got teachers that leave teacher unions as well, and teacher dues that leave with those unions. Right. And basically, on average, each year, the California Teachers Association loses about $30 million a year to teachers who are no longer in their unions. Now, I don't know about your business, my business, but if I lost $30 million a year, I would be fighting for that as well, too. And that's basically what this is coming down to.
Now, again, as somebody who's been covering politics, what I need you to understand is that in this nation, the 2 largest donors of political parties on the right is the National Rifle Association. On the left are teachers' unions.
Absolutely.
I need to repeat that. So you need to understand, when we are talking about losing $30 million, that's who contributes to political campaigns. That's who's controlling politics on the federal level, the state level, the local level as well. That's why you're seeing that. Now, Jackie, is George up? Give him 5. So here's what's going to happen. I did this I'm going to go to a couple of panelists, trust me. But George Parker was the head of the D.C. Teachers Union when Michelle Reed was the superintendent. He was her biggest opposition. George is now an ardent supporter of school choice. When you talk about the campaigns against charter schools, George was at the table when they created the policies on how to convince black people to be against charters. Yeah. And so even though it's 10:54 on the East Coast, I said, call George, wake him up. Because, and I've had George at our events before, because I want George to explain how they appeal to black people emotionally to have us oppose people like Margaret.
Absolutely.
Understand? No, this is a very clear design campaign to impact black people emotionally. Professor, I want to go to you next, because one of the ways they do that, to the point that you just made, is that teaching for black folks was the gateway to the middle class. Right. So what happens emotionally, they say, is what Margaret is doing, that's going to destroy black teachers, which means destroying the gateway to the black middle class, destroying the opportunities for African Americans to be able to make money. That is a clearly designed strategy. So what happens is black folks go, oh no, I hate charters because my mama was a teacher, my grandmother, my aunt, my uncle. They go through this whole deal, but they totally ignore 13%, 22%. They ignore that. And Doc, the problem here is that when you hear those numbers, you have an impossible task because you're at the end of the education process. And if you have a kid who's black and only 13% are proficient in math and 22 in English, that is a recipe for failure for them going to any community college or four-year school.
You know, one of the things that I wanted to mention is we've been working on an African American Achievement Task Force. We have 9 students in the year 2017 who were eligible to the UC system, who could go to the university, not a community college, not a state college, but the university system. 9
From out of this district?
Sacramento City Unified School District.
9?
9. Only 9.
How many black kids graduate?
How many do we have? Oh, Kim, how many do we have? Black students
who graduate
in Sac City.
22 grad?
Just
Yeah, 16, 17. We had 9 students.
No. I want to. How many black students graduate on an annual basis? So let's say in that class. So let's say 2,000 graduated.
Okay.
Out of 2,000, only 9 were eligible.
Yeah. Only 9 were eligible. And
9.
And we call parents in and we call students in. Black parents and black students. Black parents had never heard of A to G requirements.
right.
Black students didn't even know what you were talking about. So there is an information gap there also. And I was in the meeting.
But I bet them white kids in Long Beach in O'Donnell's district
Yeah.
know about.
Right.
A through G requirements.
Yeah, I bet they know.
Yeah. And I was in the meeting with Margaret when she met with McCarty. And I asked him, because it seemed like everything was just right back to the money. And I said, okay, let's say that you get all these black students back from the charter schools. What's going to happen differently for them? The thing that caused them to go in the first place, what's going to happen now? He did not have an answer because he had to keep talking about
He ain't got an answer because he want to ignore 13% and 22%.
Yes.
See, this is now again, so we can, if we want to stay focused on money. If you are a college graduate, you are going to earn anywhere between $1 to $2 million more over the course of your life than a person who's a high school graduate.
Mm-hmm.
So the problem with the money conversation is we get screwed by the money conversation in primary and secondary, and then end up we get screwed in making the money in terms we become adults because we are unable to meet the qualifications to go to these state schools and to be, and then when we also do go, it's taking us 5, 6, and 7 years, which is increasing the debt with loans as well, and so it now greatly impacts us financially in another way.
And it's going to take longer because now the universities have cut out the remedial courses.
There you go. Why? Funding.
Funding, and because they did not get the education in the public school system, so the colleges are saying,
not our job.
You.
My wife was the Dean of Education, Dean of Instruction at at Chicago City Colleges, later became the vice president there. The City Colleges of Chicago is the city-run system of the community colleges. They were spending $40 million a year on remedial education, which means that the Chicago public school system was not doing their job from K through 12. So they were dropping another $40 million on remedial education, in essence, the 13th grade. And folks were going, why are we doing it? Because your school system sucks. And again, we're the ones who get screwed. But the thing here is, and this is the reason we're throwing these numbers out here, is because, one, they don't want us to know these numbers.
That's right. Because
by what happens is, and again, this is the emotional appeal to black people. Black people walk around saying the answer to education is full funding. Mm-hmm. When that is not the answer. It's how you're spending the money.
Right, right.
That's the answer.
Right, it's all about management. And what we're hearing here is that their agenda is not a black agenda at all. So we have 52,800 African-American children in charter schools in California right now. What's going to happen if these bills do get passed and they're forced to go back into these public schools?
So the 660,000 total kids in charter schools, 52,000 are African-American.
Right.
Got it.
And so that's roughly almost 10%, 8% or so.
That's what, 8 to 10, yep.
Right. And so with that, what's going to happen, to these children? And then let's look into this. If my kid does not get the education they needed, suspended, or I get kicked out of school, then that puts them on a pathway to incarceration, in prison. Then that means that now I got to do a funeral instead of a graduation party. And so we have to get back, into a black agenda-seeking mindset right now.
Which means not a democratic discussion,
right?
Not a teacher discussion, but a black discussion.
Right, right, right.
And see, that's a little hard for a lot of us today. I mean, I can tell you, when I ran the Chicago Defender, I put unapologetically black on the cover, and we had these black millionaires who owned and said, what's going to happen when we go to these, white advertisers that said unapologetically black? I was like, we're a black newspaper. I think they already know we black. Right. No, and I'm saying that. I'm saying that because we got a lot of black people who don't want to say black.
That's correct.
Who don't want to demand a black agenda.
That's right. That's right.
And I'll be honest with y'all, I was in one of the meetings at the National Charter School Conference, and we were on the table, about 30 people, 2 black people around the table. This guy, and I was talking about school choice is the black choice, and the guy from California, Latino, he said, look, I believe in inclusion. I keep hearing all this black stuff. What about Latinos? I say, man, you are more than welcome to start school choice is the Latino choice. Roland's here for black people.
Right. And if everybody
let them know.
Right. And if everybody else can do their own agenda, why not us? And we need to get back on board. And I'm not saying opposing anybody else.
Right.
But we have to start supporting what we have. Black church, black schools, all of that. We need to start supporting that again.
Now, Mark, I want to go here because here's the piece. You said 52,000 students. Mm-hmm. And I guarantee you there's some people who are streaming right now, and y'all already hear it as well. Y'all heard all this as well. They say, well, not all kids can go, so what are you going to do for the kids left behind? Roland's position is no caps, which means if the traditional school not doing the job and the charter's doing the job, I want to see 5 or 10 or 20 more charters doing the job. Or if you traditional, y'all do the job. And so that's the problem with the cap, because if it's 3 out of 10 in the state right here, the cap means you can't expand.
That's right.
Even if the demand from the parents is that they want more.
And not only that, part of the legislation too is if you are an existing charter school operator and there's a cap, let's say there's a cap at 100 schools, one charter school closes. If you're an existing charter school operator, you are not allowed to open up the next school. The next
Oh,
school.
wait.
Wait a minute, let me finish it. Wait, yeah.
Wait. Hold up. So if you are a successful charter operator
That's right.
The next school
and
goes
one
to
closes,
Yes.
the next school goes to someone who has not operated a charter school before.
meaning somebody who has no track record.
Correct.
Wow.
That's right. That's right.
Y'all gonna make me cuss in church. Y'all gonna make me cuss in church. That is illogical.
Make no sense.
Yes.
And what the logical thing would be to do is to take these 10 schools in the state of California that have a majority black student population that are performing in the top half of student performance in the state and replicate them.
Right.
Right.
You know, you've got George?
George.
Hey, Roland.
All right, can y'all hear?
No.
No.
All right, keep talking. Hold on. Keep talking, George.
Hey, Roland. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
All right, George, so I want you to do this here. I want you to explain to people what was it like sitting at the table when y'all were crafting the anti-charter deal and how y'all were trained to appeal to the emotions of black people.
When you say y'all, you mean when I was a union president?
Yep.
Well, I mean, I think that as a part of our communication as a union, I think we were very, very effective, I think, as unions. Unions are, first of all, by their nature, we as African Americans look at unions as always organizations that are there for our protection. Because, you know, during the civil rights movement, for example, unions helped to support wage increases and all for African Americans. So we have a lot of faith in unions. But when I was union president, a lot of what we did as unions were not necessarily in the best interest of children, but were in the best interest of our own political power. And our number one interest was that of performing our role as union leaders. One of the things that we were always better at than the so-called reformers, and that is we knew how to use black emotions because we learned how to paint charter schools as kind of anti-black. These are a bunch of white people trying to bring people in to take money out of the pockets of black kids, or there's some racist issue involved. And we have to be very careful about that because sometimes it's not necessarily intentional racism. It is just that unions are there for their own survival as well. And when you're talking about bringing charter schools in, charter schools are not unionized for the most part, which means that it gets down to the bottom line. And it was this way for me when I was a union president, and this is just the reality, that my number one focus was to keep my union membership. And so my opposition to charter schools was based on the fact that charter schools were not unionized. And the more charter schools we had in Washington, D.C., that means the fewer students we had in the public schools, which also resulted in fewer teachers being in the public schools, which also resulted in fewer union dues coming into my union coffers. And so a lot of my opposition to charter schools and in unions in general, some of that opposition is because charter schools are not organized and it hits us in the pocket. It hits us where it hurts. And that means the decreased requirement that we receive the union dues. Now, we can't tell you that. I mean, what parents would trust us if we said to you, our number one goal is survival and continue to have our political power. We don't have political power if we don't have the money. And where does our money come from? It comes from teachers. And how do we determine the amount of money? It's determined by the number of teachers that we have in the school. And how do we determine the number of teachers in the schools? By the number of students that are in the public schools. So as charter schools increase, the number of students and the enrollment in the public schools decreases, which makes the number of teachers paying union dues decreases, and that affects our bottom line. Now, that's a hard reality, but that is one of the realities.
All right, Frank.
Yeah.
I appreciate it, George.
Hey, no problem.
Talk to you when I'm in D.C. Peace.
All right.
Now, the reason that's important because you need to understand strategy. And let me be perfectly clear. I'm not against unions. AFSCME is a big supporter of my digital show. So this is not an anti-union conversation. What this is a student conversation because this is about the reality that our kids are not getting the high-quality education they need, and we should be the ones demanding it. Margaret, go ahead.
There are 2 points I want to make. One is you often see a divide on this issue with the certificated employees union versus the classified employees union, because the classified employees unions are actually sending their kids to the schools that are underperforming. And so they want to have a conversation when it comes to charter schools that includes a discussion of academics, because they're talking about their own children.
Yep.
Right? We're talking about people of color that are employed as the janitors and the instructional aides and the food service workers whose kids are going to the schools. So to have a conversation about whether or not a charter school gets approved based on the finances alone does not serve their best interest because their children are going to the schools. That's one point I want to make. The second point I want to make is that it is true that the vast majority of African American students are going to be educated in district-run schools. And so, in my view, what we should be doing as a black community is holding everybody strictly accountable.
Right.
You hold the public charter schools accountable, and you hold those district-run schools accountable. And there are parents that have said, you know what, time's up on this. And those are the parents that find their way into charter schools.
Yep.
And at some point, we do have to say, time's up. You know, my parents are educators, and their parents before them were educators, and they come from the South, and so they were the people who raised up the rural one-room schoolhouse, and their schools were performing because those were the only schools we had, and so you had people with doctorates teaching in the public school in front of our black kids,
which is the same reason why prior to Title IX. You had mostly women who were teachers, women who actually wanted to be doctors or lawyers or scientists and engineers, but they couldn't, so they went into teaching. So after Title IX, you had a huge gap for actually you still have it since Title IX, the quality of folks in the classroom, because you really had these really high quality people, to be perfectly honest, did not want to be teachers, no disrespect, but that was the only choice that they had. And so now the industry is trying to figure out, well, now how do we get these high-quality folks to become teachers, which is forced signing bonuses, changes in pay structure, because the old adage of teach for 40 years and get your pension ain't appealing to a generation today who wants to get paid right now.
And I will also say, Roland, the mission motivates people to work for schools. 44% of my teachers are African American. It's the mission that is driving them to me, because we talk about black children and we don't change the subject. And we have a specialization in this work, and this is hard work. And we study this work. It's not by accident that we have the third highest performing majority black school in the state. It's by practice. It's by rigor. It's by high expectations.
So what you're doing here is what Eva Moskowitz is doing in New York City, which is why Success Charter Schools has 20,000 folks on the waiting list. Steve Perry's school, they had several thousand people on the waiting list. The argument that I keep making, Romel, is that if you did not have thousands of people on a waiting list, then I understand the point. But there's a reason thousands of people are trying to get into high-performing charters, because they know where their kids are going, and they're saying, I don't want that for my kid.
Yep.
That's what they're saying.
Absolutely.
So let's now shift, because the other pieces is here. You have to mobilize and organize.
Yes.
Right.
So how are you mobilizing, organizing people here to counter that state legislator and to let Sacramento know you are failing black people, and we're not going to take it. So now let's talk mobilize, organize, because it's one thing to complain. Right. Now the other thing is, how do we shift to mobilizing and organizing? Let's talk about that.
So tomorrow there's a hearing for Senate Bill 756 by Senator Elena DeRazzo. She's a Democrat out of Los Angeles, and she's got a charter moratorium bill. So we talked about the bills that are in the Assembly. Now there's another one up tomorrow.
Okay, hold on. What's her name again?
Her name is Senator Elena DeRazzo.
And where's she from?
She's a Democrat out of Los Angeles.
Now, so what needs to happen is, again, you probably already have, this is where you also get the stats on where she lives, because just like with Kevin, I'm very curious to know what's the reading rates and the math rates in where she lives, because that also speaks to what, if those numbers are the same, she's essentially opposing the kids getting a shot, and those numbers are there. And so, do you have, what time is this hearing?
This hearing is at 9 a.m. tomorrow at the state capitol. So the one thing to do in terms of mobilization is showing up. And I will tell you that when the bills in the Assembly were heard, even though they passed that policy committee in their first hearing, I mean, the fix was in. You had a majority of the members of the committee who had to take the vote. You had their names on the bills. So everybody knew what the outcome was going to be. But when 500 parents showed up, and they showed up at a ratio of 20 parents to one red-shirted teachers union opponent or a proponent of the bills, it had a tremendous impact, because the testimony in opposition from the parents and their children went on for hours, to the point where, you know, at the beginning of it, you know, they were kind of smug, right? And then it just kept going. And then beyond the point at which it needed to stop, it just kept going. And the people, and when you looked out into the hallways of the Capitol, people were lined up like they were waiting for a roller coaster ride. And if you were there, you know that it smelled like a locker room. I mean, that's the kind of activism that we need. We have to show up on the day of and testify. That's one way of doing it. And then there's letters to the legislature.
So I'm curious to know on a state level, who is there an entity that is leading that mobilization organization in California? Who is it, and how can folks access them?
So it is the California Charter Schools Association, CCSA. We are the lead of organizing all of these efforts. Margaret has been essential in driving us forward, making sure that we don't change the subject, and making sure that we keep all of these things firmly in our vision. So just go to ccsa.org, and the first link is Take Action Today, and you can sign up for alerts, text messages, emails, lets you know exactly what you need to do and when. The system's easy. You get to go in, you can text to your representative's office, you can write letters, you can call, you can do wherever you're at, we can meet you there. We need everyone.
Pastors, what is happening?
Well, what we're doing is through the National Action Network, we are partnering with CCSA and Fortune. We were there last week with them doing a press conference, opposing the bills there. And so we just need to show up again, like Margaret said, show up, partner with the CCSA. Also, go to their website. You can go to the National Action Network website. We're national, but we're statewide as well. So statewide.
But how many pastors? I need a number. How many pastors have you organized and mobilized? And of those pastors, how many have committed a certain number of church members to be a part of this? So what I'm looking for, 20, 30, 40 pastors, 400, 500, 700, 1,000, 2,000 people.
How many pastors in the room right now? How many pastors in the room? All right.
If you're a pastor in the room, stand up. So, no, I ain't say sit down. I ain't say sit down. I ain't say sit down. So the pastors in the room, are all of you mobilizing? Are you taking these messages into your pulpits? Are you specifically organizing your church members, walking them through, explaining to them these very issues and what you need them to do?
Well, I think it's the education part right here for them.
Right.
And so to kind of put them off the hook.
No, that's him. He ain't got the microphone. No. Because here's the piece. This is the piece. This is why I still say standing. Because we have to stop being romantic about the Black freedom movement.
That's right.
And talk about it in the past tense, when the reality is the same organizing methods still work today.
Yep.
And the connection has to be that this is literally impacting. So now let me go ahead and really boil down y'all alley, sit in your pew. You need to be on top of this, because if you don't, this is going to have an impact on the amount of your tithes 20 years from now.
Whether the church is open or not.
This is going to, no. Follow me here.
True.
Follow me here. Ask any pastor, a real pastor does not tell you how many members they have. A real pastor will tell you how many families they have. Families are homeowners. Families stay through multiple generations. And so if we have a group of renters we're raising,
Right.
they will not be family members at churches. And so this has a direct impact on the future survival of your churches, the quality of young folks in the education they're getting, because that will determine their income, will determine where they live, and whether they're renters or homeowners. And so this thing goes beyond just where they are now. This has an impact on your church growth 10, 20, 30 years from now. Y'all can go ahead and sit down now.
So I want to say, Roland, there's something that people can do right now, and that is to pull out your phone and text 4 kids.
Yeah.
No, hold on. See, Margaret, you go way too fast. See, Margaret ain't used to this. Now, y'all pull your phones out. See, this how.
Show me how it's done.
Margaret, what church you go to?
I go to Genesis.
What's that? Episcopalian church? What's that? Y'all one of them new churches? Because y'all ain't doing this.
No.
Doc, you ain't doing this thing right. Pull your phone out and raise your phone in the air. Pull your phone out, raise your phone in the air. Pull your phone. I need to be able to see your screen. Pull your phone out.
He knows how to do
Pull
it.
your phone out. Yes.
Teach us, Roland.
I was
Teach us.
born and raised Catholic, but it was a black Catholic church.
Church.
Raise your phone high. Y'all look, y'all got phones over here, Deltas. Come on, I see all this red. Now you need to go to the text message part of your phone right now. Hit messages. Yeah, y'all text. This is not rhetorical. This is literal. Some of y'all ain't following my instructions right now. All right, Margaret, give them the number.
The number is, you want to text 4 kids to 52886.
Hold up.
Tell them the number.
The number first. Okay,
See Margaret right there, Margaret, right there. Lord have mercy, she an educator. She can't follow instructions. Margaret, I need the number first.
Okay, Roland, the number is 52886.
I need y'all to text right now to 52886. 52886. One more time, 52886. Now I need you to text what?
The number 4, kids.
Is there a space or 4 kids?
All together.
4 kids, no space.
No space.
4 KIDS. 4 KIDS. Now, what are they texting to? What is that for?
What that allows you to do is really simply send a letter to your state legislator.
Okay.
If you put your information in there, it'll tell you who your
So
legislator
what it's going to
is.
say is, ask your legislators to hashtag stand for all kids. There's a link there. And then, of course, message data rates may apply. But that's old rules. You ain't got to pay for that now. Y'all know. And so when you click that link, you can send a letter to your state legislator.
That's right, and they'll get it immediately.
All right. Now, why is that important? Now, here's the other piece. Just because you did it here, that means now if you're on WhatsApp, GroupMe, Signal, y'all got them long black family text message chains like my mama, get on my nerves. 85 people, family members who I don't want to have my cell phone number, now got it. Y'all should send a text to them, say, send a text to this number and type 4 kids. This is no different than how we mobilize black people during the Black Freedom Movement. We're simply using technology. You can go to your social media pages, your Facebook page, your Twitter page, your Instagram page, your Tumblr page, your Snapchat page, all LinkedIn, all of them, and send the same thing, because we have to mobilize people. Now, you say tomorrow, hold on one second, Doc. No, it says a hearing at 9 a.m. tomorrow.
9 a.m. tomorrow.
How many people do you already have accompanying you to that hearing?
We have hundreds.
Yeah, we have
the last
400.
You already got 400 people. All right. Anybody in here, you've already signed up to go to the hearing tomorrow? Raise your hand. Okay, a few hands, so put your hands down. Who in this room would like to accompany Margaret to this hearing tomorrow? Okay, how should they sign up? What should they do?
Wow.
Yeah,
So they should go to the CCSA.
This is an interactive thing.
This is good. Okay, Ramel, you need to help me out by looking up where it is on cccsa.org, where you sign up to go.
Now, here's how we're going to do this thing. When this thing is over, all y'all who want to go to the hearing tomorrow, y'all going to come to this side of the stage. Y'all going to come right over here. If you want to go to the hearing tomorrow, I want y'all to come to this side of the stage.
Yep, I'll take your
and y'all need to, he will get all your information. Because we have to show up there, show up and show out. And here's what's critical. Wherever you live, you should know, and if you don't know who specifically your state rep is and your state senator, just because you think somebody's your state rep does not mean they're your state rep. There's a whole bunch of people go to D.C., swear a Black Caucus member represents them, and it's a white Republican who represents them. and I'm like, that white Republican needs to see you, because if you're a constituent, that person's accountable to you. Go ahead.
I want to also challenge all the pastors to take down my email, right? Nan, Sacramento @gmail.com.
Repeat
right?
that.
Nan, Sacramento @gmail.com. All right, and say you want to be on the team, and so we can help mobilize this issue in our churches, in our communities, and help out this issue.
And also through the Black press, of course, we've been doing a series of articles and opinions related to all of this. So not only here in Sacramento, but we had an editorial that went throughout the state through many of the Black papers with assistance from California Black media as well that are trying to help educate our folks about all of these issues.
There's one other thing I want to say, Roland, and that is some of that style of activism that is actually getting out on the streets and protesting is what we need to do here. You know, I sent a letter to Mr. McCarty, where 3 of my schools are located as a district, and I put the most influential names that I could think of, the people who I had named the schools after. Pastor Ephraim Williams, the pastor of St. Paul Missionary Baptist Church, this influential church home that we sit in today. Dr. Hazel Mahone, Dr. Alan Rowe, and Dr. Mahone is humble. She was the first woman to be a superintendent in Sacramento County. Dr. Alan Rowe, who is the founder of University College Action Network and has gotten 15,000 kids in the scholarship dollars to follow to historically Black colleges. William Lee and Larry Lee, the publishers of the Sacramento Observer newspaper. The point is that I got wet signatures, and I had to go around to get those wet signatures. And we dropped it off in Kevin McCarty's office in person and through his electronic process, and we still didn't get a meeting. The only reason we got a meeting is because I brought a group of activists, including the clergy, in front of his district office, and I screamed my lungs out. Now, we train our students that if you do all the right things, that you'll be treated with respect. We train our students that if you do all the right things, you'll be treated with respect. But the fact of the matter is, for me to get a meeting from Kevin McCarty, who's a member of the California Legislative Black Caucus, I had to take my Black female self with a Harvard degree and a Berkeley degree and scream my head off to just get a meeting. And magically, by the time I turned the corner, I got a text from Kevin. I'd be happy to meet with your group. But it wasn't enough to have Pastor Williams' signature on a piece of paper. So what we're talking about, these convenient ways to be active, you can do it right now.
Right.
It's actually not enough to move the issue. I want Simeon Gant to stand. He is my mobilizer.
I was about to say, I saw that you're alpha man. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Rest of y'all know your youth groups. That ain't my problem. But go ahead. Go ahead.
He is my organizer, and if you are interested in getting involved in more active ways, in more grassroots ways, demonstrating, having the protest on the sidewalk that we are so used to Reverend Al Sharpton doing, right, and created a model for that for us, then I want you to go to Simeon after this, and so he can connect your name, because we are going to continue to be active, and it's going to be an inconvenience. And I will tell you that the people who are the best at this, the best teachers of how to do this disruption, are the teachers' unions themselves.
Yep. Right.
If they want you to know that they have an issue, they're going to be out in the streets. And that's the same place that black people need to be, not only when our young men and women get gunned down in the street.
That's right.
But also when they die of neglect every day in classrooms where they underachieve.
Right. No, it's an excellent point. And what has happened, and really in many ways, it has been a severe disservice to what I call the post-civil rights movement babies. I was born November 14th, 1968. King gets killed April 4th, 1968. And so we were raised, and unfortunately we had parents, black parents, who said, I don't want you to have to do those things because I had to do those things. But the reality is, Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand, never have, never will. Mm-hmm. And so what we have is, we literally have generations, we have now had two generations, now a third generation of African Americans who believe that that protest thing really means nothing, but the reality is there has been nothing in the history of black people in the year of return, 400 years, that was not achieved through protest. And yes, you would think philosophically we should not be protesting black state legislators. But the reality is, if there's somebody who is doing wrong, then they must feel that heat, must feel that pressure. Right. And I mean it, at their district office, at their church, because the actions that they are taking are detrimental to our children. And your child or your niece, your nephew, your cousin, they need to see you care enough to say, I'm going to bring that heat against somebody who is going against our interest. I'm a life member on the board of directors of the National Association of Black Journalists. And we publicly called out CNN and the president, Jeff Zucker, for no black executive producers, no black VPs, no black SVPs, no black EVPs, no black direct reports. And people were sitting here going, well, you know, should y'all have done that? I'm like, yes. I said, because he needs to understand that we're not going to be silent. And there were people who, literally, I got some board members who were not happy. And I said, y'all got to get over it or get off this board. Because being nice got us zero.
Right.
Well, obviously being nice didn't work. And so that's really where we have to be with a state of mind. Doc, I want to go to you because, again, what you're doing in terms of trying to get more of us ready for college, all of these things we're talking about has a direct bearing on when you said 9. That number shouldn't be 9. That number should be 900 or 9,000. Because what happens between, and we know, by the time that child max 5th grade, I mean, you're now competing against time, right, in terms of trying to catch up. And so we have to take this thing seriously, that what is happening from K through that 4th grade is really determining whether you're going to have 9 or 90 or 900.
And you know, it almost starts from the time a child enters school. And by the 3rd grade, if that kid can't read, he keeps getting skipped to this grade, to this grade, to this grade. And each year, it becomes exceedingly harder. And so they're not going to catch up with unless there's some kind of great intervention. But I also worked in the prison system, and the inmates were reading at a 3rd grade level.
90% of all inmates in Illinois state prisons were illiterate.
Okay.
There's a direct tie to illiteracy and prisons.
Absolutely. 3rd grade level. And those students, I mean, you know, it's a captive audience now. They loved going to school, and they could look back and see what they didn't do. But we can't wait until kids get into the 10th,
That's
11th, 12th grade and say, okay, we need to do something for you now. It's too late, because a lot of those kids could hardly wait to become 16 so they could drop out.
Yep.
And when they drop out, they don't just drop out, they drop into something. They drop into crime.
Right.
And every time I see a black kid's face when some crime has been committed, the first thing I want to know, is that a high school dropout? Did he finish school? And if he did, why is he doing that?
And now because if you look at the numbers now.
And that's what we did. We went back and looked at the girls. Not much better. No, we are in a lot of trouble. I can tell you that.
Yeah, and you know, Margaret said earlier that the fix is in. I think also on the accountability side that we talked a little bit about earlier, the fix is in there too, right? So as Dr. Mahone just pointed out, the longer black students, or really any students, are in a traditional system, if they can't read by 3rd grade, the longer they're in there, the further behind they're going to get over time. Every 5 years, remember that charter schools have to prove that they're making those gains. If I have a school, if Margaret has a school, as she does, and kids come in at 5th grade reading at a 1st or 2nd grade level, at the end of her 5-year term, she still has to show that she's bringing those kids up as at least as far as where the other kids in the schools surrounding are. That is an incredible barrier to cross, right? Because as families are getting more choice, as they find schools that fit, you know, population-wise, or even in terms of pedagogy, the other schools, the traditional public schools, their scores start to rise, right? Because students start to see that they're finding people who look like them, they're finding affinity, so that's where they're going to go. It's going to take our charter schools time to reach the growth that they definitely are showing. But if they have to show every 5 years that they're equivalent to the other schools, and they have to close, if they're not, then these schools aren't getting a fair shot either, right? And so the other thing that needs to be done on the other side of this is that California needs to explore an academic growth metric. So it's not just about proficiency. It's not just about whether or not a student is met or exceed on a state test. It is how much growth has a student made year over year. Where did you come in at, and where are you at now? And how is that compared to the other schools? And we don't have a way to look at that yet.
Now, let me put this again, because I think what happens is we also, a lot of times, we talk about this thing in this very sort of, you know, high sort of area. And we'll do it this way. So, how old are you? You in a red shirt. 11. You're 11. How old are you? 11. Right here. 9. 8. 8. Okay. So, we are 24 years away from America being a nation majority people of color. By 2043, 53% of America will be nation majority people of color. That means black, Latino, Asian, Native American. Whites will comprise 47% of America. By 2039, the majority of working class Americans will be people of color. In 3 to 4 years, in 10 states in America, the average white death rate is going to be higher than the average white birth rate. Just fact. So so the reality is, white folks kept having kids, black people kept having kids, Latino kept having kids, and so the demographics are changing. It's not just a question of, if you would listen to the crazy folks in Washington, D.C., oh, it's legal immigration. No, that's not what was really driving this. America is shifting from a majority white nation to a nation as people of color. The problem is, unless we confront this very issue today, in the next 24 years, we in many ways are going to be like South Africa. When I interviewed Winnie Mandela talked about the high unemployment rate of black South Africans. And she said what people forget was the children were protesting during apartheid. They were fighting apartheid when they should have been in school. Now, apartheid is gone. They're now adults. Now they're illiterate. So they're now dealing with that and then they're birthing children who are likely going to be illiterate. So the issue that we're facing is that if we don't treat this as the most important civil rights issue of our lifetime, then in 24 years, when she's 32, when he's 35, we're going to have another generation of kids in the exact same position. So for a lot of us, we keep thinking about this thing in terms of, well, I have a kid or I have a niece or a nephew, and then once they're out, then I'm done. No, this issue we're talking about will have a direct impact on the future of this city, of black churches, of black colleges, of black newspapers. It completely impacts everything that we're talking about. So the question is, will we have an educated black population, or will we be like South Africa? We're in the majority. We don't control the finances. We don't control the power. We don't control the resources. And we still are looking way behind everybody else. So we have to be thinking about this thing from a lineage legacy standpoint.
That's right.
Meaning every action we take today, going to that hearing at 9 a.m., has an impact on 2043. Mm-hmm. Fighting to keep not having these caps impacts 2043. It impacts wealth, the ability to be able to make $1 or $2 million more over the course of your lifetime with a college degree than those who only have a high school diploma. It impacts all of these different things. It impacts right now black home ownership is around 41%. We've never gotten it as high as 60%. It impacts black home ownership. And so we should not just look at this thing as Margaret School or black kids in school. The discussion we're having today has a direct bearing, literally, on the future survival of black America. That's how major this thing is. Doc, go ahead.
This should be an all hands on deck type of situation here. And you know, for some of this is like really high up there, high talk. Some of it is. But then also we can get back to grassroots things that we can do in our churches, in our communities, where we got mentorship programs, reading programs, you know, things
Freedom
like
schools.
Freedom schools.
Yeah.
And we support those. Yeah. And if you've made it, you've done it. You know, my son is graduating from a public school. He's one, I guess, the 9 that got into the UC system. But then
I think I saw him.
Come on, yeah. But then he got a full ride scholarship to Harvey Mudd College, the MIT on the West Coast, and that's because he had a 4.5 GPA, correct? Cumulative, you know. So we're excited about that. But I have his mama and the mother-in-law, my mother-in-law. She helped teach them, you know, homeschooled them before they got into school.
Right.
You know, and trained them, taught them how to read before they got into school. Yep. And were taught to read. We just can't just put everything on a charter school, public school.
Oh, absolutely.
We got to get some home training, some community training, and make sure that our children are right before they even enter into any system.
But before I go to take some questions, so a couple of things. First, if you're a pastor, you should go to the Children's Defense Fund. They have an entire toolkit on how to open a freedom school in your church. So that's first. And so you don't have to ask anybody's opinion. You don't have to ask anybody's permission. You should be tapping into your retired teachers in your congregations to turn your churches into freedom schools, offering tutoring sessions after school. You should be doing a census in your area. I would say a half-mile radius around your church. Send your members door to door saying, is there a child in this house under 18? Let them know that you don't have to be a member of the church to come to the free tutoring sessions. And then guess what? You might end up getting new members because you actually are showing up knocking on somebody's door. I'm just saying, amen. But the last thing is this here, and again, why I need us to think about this thing just so far beyond. So when he said got a full ride, let's just say he got a partial ride. Let's say it was 50%. That means that the average black kid leaves college with double the amount of debt as a white child, which means that his son is going to be, when he graduates, he is starting his adult life debt-free, which means that his earnings for his first 10 years after college will not be sucked up by student loans.
That's right, that's right.
Which means that if his son decides to get married and buy a house, then even if, let's say, daddy doesn't give him a loan for it or give him a gift for it, he's now able to now do a down payment on the house and not have accrued so much other debt. So again, what happens, I have my sister's 4 kids, all of them are top students, all got money to different colleges. That means that they are starting their lives out, and probably I would dare say the top 0.5% of black students, because they're not going into adulthood with massive debt. So that small decision to read to your kid right now, force them to recite back, to go through all of that, has an economic impact 15 years down the road. So I'm trying to get us to see this thing beyond today, and the decisions we make today has an impact, which means that his son, if his son goes into adulthood debt-free, that means there's an 80 to 90% chance that how many kids he has, they will come into adulthood likely debt-free. So this is a generational thing.
That's right.
All right, we're going to take some questions here. So here are the ground rules. I got the mic. I don't need your help. You can just put your hand down, keep it in your pocket. Don't grab the microphone. I got it. We ain't here for no sermonettes. We want you to ask a question. If you got a specific person you want to answer your question, target them. We're going to get as many questions in as possible. So how I'm going to do this, I'm going to go from here, 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 here. All right? We ain't lining up. You don't get favors because you old, because you alpha. Ain't how we do it. So on this side of the room, anybody got a question this side of the room? Your hands up first. Step out now. Come on out. Name, what's your question?
My name is Dr. Eric Gervingberg, president of the Hawk Institute. Question I have, Margaret, you and I have talked about establishing an educational consortium. All the organizations that are trying to help black kids, community-based organizations like the pastor talked about, how do we leverage our resources so we help all black kids with programs like the Hawk Institute, Youth Speaks, all of those things? How do we do that?
I'm glad he asked that question, Margaret, because in every city that we take school choice is the black choice too, I am challenging in those cities to create that very thing. First of all, are the very people who are involved in the charter school movement, but to create those educational consortiums. So really what should happen is, and this doesn't require, I don't believe in group meetings. I believe whoever wants to show up, shows up. So even if it's 4 or 5, you establish that consortium here, and then that way you're all the connectors. And so that way when somebody comes in, they say, well, who the black education people? Right there. That's a group, it's an ad hoc group. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was that model. SNCC was that model. They were a national entity and were made up of different local groups. And that way, if you have an education consortium that's here in Sacramento, we've been to Atlanta, we've been to Indianapolis, and so then if you say, hey, Roland, we want to connect with people in Atlanta, boom, they've already started that. And so we're creating one of those things. Margaret, your thoughts on that? And if you already done something like that, what are you doing?
Yeah, I think that that's a great thing to do, and I think that what I can do as a leader is that, you know, we have buildings, we have schools. That's a resource, and I think we have an opportunity to have an ecosystem, and that ecosystem can cultivate and grow in Fortune schools across our 7 campuses. And they also can reach beyond the walls of our campuses. But I think it's a great place to start, and I think that all of the different organizations that are here are evidence that ecosystem exists in California, in Sacramento, that we have a very rich black civic life in Sacramento. And so I would love to work with Hawk and the other organizations here towards creating that type of council.
And here's the deal, the people who don't want to be involved, fine, don't call them. do the work, and then all of a sudden when they want to get involved, tell them, come on, but we're not going to stop because of you. But SNCC really is, I think, that model, that sort of that consortium that when they met at Shaw University, that's what they actually did. Come on. Baby, I got you. I got you. I got you. Go ahead.
Good evening. I would like to really acknowledge Miss Fortune, Margaret Fortune. She's one of our young people who we are extremely proud of. Thank you. And one of the reasons being, I'm not going to try to embarrass you, that this Fortune School is a vision beyond all of you, us old activists, us elder activists. It's number 5 on the 10-point plan. And I thank you so much because I've gone through the public school. I had a choice. I always wanted a choice. I couldn't afford the choices that were offered. First time I had a choice to take my child out because I have 6 sons. It's difficult with boys. I have 7 siblings. They're all male. So I learned after my mother. Thank you for that choice. But there's one other point I want to make. In all of the constituency groups, I haven't heard black labor, nor have I heard black moms. I retired from the state of California. I worked for the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. I was a union steward, and I retired as a chief steward. The majority of the workforce in the state of California, state employees, are female. We pay union dues. I was paying $90 a month on a clerical salary. Those moms would get calls from the schools about their children. Choice. Choice. Fortune School gives me a choice. They're not suspending my child.
All right.
Not that he was going to be suspended anyway.
Yeah, not when you walk around with that stick. Got 6 sons, got that big stick. They ain't gonna act a fool. Question, step over, step out. They gonna get beat with that stick, they act a fool. All right, what you got?
Mitchell Stewart. I'm a federal employee, and she touched on something. Our country is really suffering concerning the infrastructure. So you have programs that are structured for trades and labors, or a partnership with anybody that works in trades and labors, because the country was built on trades and labors.
Well, actually, it was built
Hello.
free labor.
Free labor.
But go ahead, I understand.
It was free.
Yeah.
So you're asking what? Does their school have that? Have the trades as a part of it?
Yes, are you looking to the future as far as developing a curriculum for trades and labors?
Cool.
So the focus of our school is particularly our high school is actually STEAM, so science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. We haven't had a focus as you've described, but we are investing our focus in the sciences.
But because I interviewed Bob and Sheila Johnson, and they talked about that as well. And again, that doesn't mean that can't be a school that's created,
right.
Because part of the issue we do have is that we have really, really book smart kids today who can't fix jack. No, straight up, they can't fix nothing.
I can't fix it.
And so that's one of the things. And see, this is all now. But understand though, this is a hard thing for black people because what happened was when you had, first of all, coming out of slavery, you had this 30-year battle between black freed slaves and Hampton University, because they wanted to only teach black folks agriculture. Booker T. Washington was the biggest proponent of that. Part of the problem is that at Tuskegee, yes, they could work, but they literally couldn't read or write. So you had this huge battle. Go all the way up to the 70s, black parents fought trades because black kids were being steered into trades as opposed to college. They threw them out. Now the problem is you have folks now who don't have a skill set. So there has to be a balance there. And so it can't be we're going to force you into a trade. It really should be your choice. But that is a critical deal because, look, I am not unclogging a toilet. But again, though, master plumbers can command 6-figure salaries.
That's right.
So we were operating now in this world where there are some people, and again, it's hard for us to admit this, there are some people who simply are not designed for four-year institutions. But the question is, what kind of education do they get? And so there's a balance there in terms of the whole issue with trades. And so, but that still is an opportunity, and that discussion is happening all across the country. Folks are talking about really emphasizing those trade schools, bringing them back into schools. All right, what's your question?
My question is, we heard the numbers of the overall population, but I want the audience to hear the numbers of the black male population graduating from high school. What do those numbers look like? Because it could probably put some people to tears in here tonight if they really hear those numbers. Because there's a crisis.
We got them?
In the middle of a crisis, and we have to address the issue of the black male.
Do we have them? Well, somebody pull your phone out and Google them.
Oh, yeah.
I don't have them. Maybe Cassandra has them. Do you have them, Cassandra?
Well, Cassandra. Cassandra like, don't you call me out like that? Cassandra like, I ain't trying to say nothing. She like, I'm way in the back, I ain't saying nothing. Cassandra, do you know those numbers?
No, I don't, but I will look them up.
Oh, Cassandra, I got the microphone. Put your hand down.
Okay, that's right. That's right. You did say that, right?
She ain't want to talk. Now she want to grab the mic. Go ahead.
No, but to Dr. Mahomes' point earlier is that in Sac City Unified School District in particular, we do have an issue with graduation rates for African American boys in particular, and then girls secondly. And what we're trying to address on that task force is the culture of the schools as well as the academics, so we can turn that around.
All right. Now we were still gonna Google it, so if somebody got it, let me know.
All right.
You got a question?
We have it, Roland.
Yeah, go ahead. You got it?
Yeah,
All
Kim
right.
has it.
Hold on one second. Here we go. What you got? Put your hand down. I got this. Don't ever let black folks take the microphone. We'll be here till Bible study.
Black males, 146.
That's the number, 146 total? What's the percentage?
Yes, sir.
Now give us the context. What is that?
Out of 2,600 total grads, 365 black, 146 male.
Got it. That ain't good.
140. Can you repeat that? 146
She said 146.
out of.
Out of 365 total.
No, Sacramento total.
In Sacramento.
Sacramento.
In Sac City.
Unified.
Yeah.
How many total graduates?
Right.
Didn't you say 2,000 something?
Yeah.
2693.
2,693 graduates. 300 plus were black.
46 were male.
146 were male. Okay, got it. In Sac City. I'm gonna go here, then here. Wow. Step out. Yeah, hands down.
Okay. I don't know if these are questions or general comments.
It's gonna be a question.
Okay, it's going to be a question. My first thing is, we talked a lot about education tonight, but I bet if we really thought about it, it'd be hard for us as individuals to define what education is. Whenever you're dealing with a problem, first thing is you got to define what that problem is. And we talked a lot about education, but I doubt if we really tried to define it, we probably would fail at that.
No, we ain't gonna fail at it, but I understand your point.
My second point is, I have two kids, and I went to their school board meeting. I go all the time, and I told them that I am chiefly responsible for the education of my kids. I took that responsibility. I don't rely, and I said I will join a partnership with you, and we'll work collaboratively on their education, but I am chiefly responsible. I think more of us, we're looking for somebody else, and this is not trying to kick the can.
We got you.
Okay, but I think we look for other folks to do what Yah has entrusted us to do, take care of our families. So, I think the first thing we got to do is look at ourselves. And I work many hours, and I'm always tired when I get home. But I do the hard work of going through my kids' lessons. Mm-hmm. I make sure that I have a 5-year-old. I make sure I read him that story, and I make sure he goes over his homework. And I'm tired, trust me. My wife is tired, but that's a commitment that we've made. You need to make the same commitment as community. Thank
And
you.
Ramel, you actually addressed this because when you talked about this idea of for charter schools 5 years and proficiency is one thing, and we also know, look, passing a test is one thing. What are they actually learning is a whole other thing. The whole idea of deductive reasoning, processing, all those different things along those lines. But the reality is, Margaret, you have a standard that is already given to you that you have to meet. And so the whole point of what is education, you define that.
So in our charter petition, we have to define what education is in the 21st century. So for our model, it's called the 5 pillars. It's high expectations, choice and commitment, more time, focus on results, and citizenship. So that's our education philosophy. And we have to follow the state standards for education, which is the Common Core state standards. And the state prescribes what they expect for kids to know and be able to do for every grade level. And so we have to have an educational program that delivers on that. And then the way in which we know how kids are doing in school is that we assess them. They take local assessments, but they also take state assessments, which is why we have the data. And the last thing I'll say is hearkening back to what Roland said in the very beginning. When you have an opportunity to craft your own program, you also have the opportunity to highlight things that are important to you. Black history. Our school song is "Lift Every Voice and Sing." You might recognize that. Our attention.
One verse or all 3 verses?
We do 1 verse every morning.
No, y'all got to hit with all 3 verses. Okay, I got you.
But you get my point. We have an opportunity to prepare kids in Black culture because that's a priority to us, in addition to all the things that the state says we have to do to educate kids.
And you can only do that if it is a Black-run charter. Lift Every Voice and Sing will not be the school song in a traditional Black school. Right. That's why you got to be Black-run charter.
And Huey the Panther will not be your mascot.
Ain't gonna happen.
He's ours.
There you go. Real quick, got a question here. Them take one more over there, and then we're done. Got it? Go.
All right, first of all, my hands are in my pocket. And number 2 is, thank you, Margaret. I'm from San Bernardino, California. We came all the way down because Margaret, we wanted to support her. The other thing is, I'm one of the few people in this state, in this nation, who have seen 164 African-American male students killed. 1 minute in my office, the next minute they're dead. The cyclical nature of trauma for all those kids who have dropped out at 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, the cyclical nature is something we have to address if we're going to get to what we really need to do with education. So my question is, what the heck are we going to do about that? I'm the rebel. I know my lane. I'm on the streets every single day. The guy who killed my best friend when I was 16 years old, last week, after he got out of prison 2 years ago, we had at San Bernardino at the park, 17 different gang members were hugged up to show peace. So my question is, what are we going to do with all those kids who have dropped out? And Roland, help us if you can.
Do you have mental health counseling dealing with PTSD in your schools?
We do. We do.
Anybody?
And to your point, that's why, I talk about an ecosystem. Some people talk about a village. When you have control over the institution,
That's right.
and how the institution does its work, you also have control over who comes in to embrace our students. And I think that's an important part of all of our recovery from the violence that is visited upon our community. I appreciate that you came all the way from San Bernardino to participate in this today.
So I want you to get with Hawk because there might be some partnership there, okay? Got it. Question.
All right, so my question is a former educator with Sacramento City Unified and St. Hope Public Schools. We talked a lot about education and things that are needed in the classroom. Specifically, can you speak to resources that are available for parents? Because I don't know of any parents in here that can break down math from a Common Core standpoint where 9 plus 10 really does equal 21. Can you speak to that for us?
Anybody? Go ahead. I'm gonna go over here if you got a question.
So there's
All
a
right,
book
I'm gonna go
called
there, and then
Parenting
I'm gonna go here.
Practices. There's a book called Parenting Practices by Rex Fortune. I think he might be in the audience. It's a study of
Is Rex here? Where you at? Well, stand up, Rex.
There he is.
Got any books in the trunk? Got any books in the trunk?
I'm sure he.
All right, I'm just saying, you know, black people will say out the back of a trunk in a heartbeat. Go right ahead.
Right. So I would look towards that book, Parenting Practices, because we do a whole parent academy. We actually hold it here at St. Paul Missionary Baptist Church, where we have a whole curriculum for parents, and it's based on research of parents of color, mostly low income, who have been successful in sending their kids on to college. And so we prepare our parents with that skill set, because it can be learned.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how we address that in our schools. Thank you so much for the question.
Question?
Don't get upset with me, Roland, but I marched with King in 1963, Brent Mello. And I've got a dog bite on my leg. I've never been in a part of a forum in my entire life. I am just honored to be here with such magnificent people. The panel, you're awesome. And King Roland, I waited a lifetime to meet you, my man. You're a saint, brother. My son, I'm sorry. You're saying it's just my son. And I just want to say that most of you won't understand when I say that. With my experience, I'm 71 years old. Like I said, I'm marching in Birmingham.
Black don't crack.
Sure don't, right. And I was in Birmingham 63. But the vote, everybody talks about the vote. And as you know what we did in 1963, we demonstrated, as piggyback what Margaret said, we put it to action. We demonstrated, we protest. That's what makes a change in this country, you know. And people don't understand when I say on my Facebook, because not so much as the vote, but the action, the protest. Like
Action after the vote, too.
Absolutely, it creates the vote. And like I said, I have dog bites to prove that. And you, young man, I'm especially proud and honored to meet you, because I look at you as a king. I got every recorded program you've ever done. Aww. And I've never voted for anything in my entire life, but if you ever run for anything, I would vote for you. I love it.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Young man. I ain't gonna run for office, because see, I cuss people out. I got little patience. I cuss them out, but I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Thanks so much. I saw you. Come on, baby. Stand up. Stand up. Last question. Last question. Put your hand down. Put that hand down. I knew she was gonna raise that hand. Put the hand down. Put your hands behind your back.
It's a reflex.
That's right. Put your hands behind your back. Assume the position. Come on.
Actually, Margaret answered my question. I really wanted to know what intentional efforts are being created to allow parents leadership opportunities and professional development opportunities to best support your efforts. The African proverb that a child educated only at school is an uneducated child, that there needs to be more engagement of families of your schools to take on that leadership role and to help provide a resource and a partnership with your programs.
Okay, so I'm gonna do this here. I'm gonna answer that, because I want to go beyond Margaret schools. Because again, we talked about earlier, we talked about mobilization, and so Margaret, get the text number ready, get that ready, and then also your email as well, and then also where people can reach out to you, and that is, he actually said it. Hawk said it, the brothers, the parents said it, and that is, Margaret's doing her job. Doc's doing her job. He's doing his job, doing his job, doing his job. We don't have to say, what is the institution already doing? What is required is, and this is where I always talk about, you can't have a strong nation without a strong state, which requires a strong city, which requires strong neighborhoods, which requires strong blocks, streets, houses, house, individual in the house. So what is needed is literally, where are you, and then what's in your surrounding area. What I mean by that is, if you say, I'm going to commit to help tutor 3 kids, that's 3 more that's being tutored right now. If you say, if you're the pastors, if you go to Children's Defense Fund, and you say we're going to create freedom schools, we're going to create a tutorial program from 4 to 7 p.m. in our schools, use existing churches, tap retired teachers in your particular church, ask them to commit to once a week to be able to offer tutoring services, do a survey in your area, you could transform reading and math numbers overnight because you have your own ecosystem. That's the ecosystem. We keep talking about a village, but a village is actually made up of people. And so the question is it the people next to me? Is it my cousins, my nieces? Is it my neighbors, church members? So really leaving here, everybody actually has marching orders. Every single person. Now, what you have to decide right now, and this is the model that the brother talked about Birmingham, and this is the piece that people keep forgetting. When King was selected to lead the Montgomery Improvement Association, there literally are more people. I need you to understand this because y'all about to think I'm crazy. There are more people who are literally sitting in this room than the number of people who were in the basement in Montgomery who decided to launch a one-day boycott. I've been to that church. That's a small church. Follow me here. The Montgomery bus boycott was a one-day boycott. They then said, let's go 5. After 5, they said, let's keep going. That's how it went 381 days. The decision of a handful of people in a church basement led to 13 years of mass action. It led to the Voting Rights Act, Civil Rights Act, Fair Housing Act, led to all of those changes, 13 people, 13 years. Why am I saying that? Because the problem that we have is we believe, and Hawk actually gave it, when he said create an education consortium, you can literally change education in Sacramento with only the people in this room. Which means, are the people in this room willing to start? You don't have to call anybody else who's not here. It can actually start right here. Which means that Delta should be challenging AKAs, challenging Zetas, challenging Sigma Gamma Rho, challenging Alphas, Omegas, Kappas, Iotas, and Sigmas to say, how do you use a collective resource of the Divine Nine to also change this? Which means links, ladies of distinction, men's groups. Here's the piece that we keep ignoring. We have tremendous black infrastructure we don't use.
That's right.
We already have black organizations. We already have infrastructure. We already have all of these different things. We don't use it. So the question now is, what are you prepared to do leaving here? This event literally happened in 2 weeks. Margaret sent me an email. She sent my wife an email. Hey, we got this bill. Can y'all come to Sacramento? We were already planning to go to Philadelphia in May. We typically spend 2 to 3 months picking it. This thing happened in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. I was supposed to go to Houston tomorrow for the Women of Color Presidential Forum, and I said, no, I'll come here, then go back to D.C. But what you have to now decide is, what is your commitment? So what I want you to do is decide this. You don't have to decide right now. What's the one thing that you're willing to commit yourself over the next 364 days? Is it PTSD and trauma? Is it helping parents when it comes to their children? Is it creating the consortium? Is it organizing and teaching and tutoring? So what's your one thing? I don't want you to pick 4 or 5 because you're not going to do any of them. No, you're just not. I want you to pick that one thing. And then a year from now, you should say, what did I commit to, and then what did I actually do? If it means raising money, if it means assisting, if it means trying to increase that number from 9 to 20, whatever it is, you have to decide what that is. But one thing that cannot happen, if you leave here, every single one of you, and if you walk out of that door and then you don't commit to one thing, you have wasted your time and you are failing our children. You have to decide what that one thing is. Short term, defeat the bill. That's the short term. Defeat the bill. Target the person who's proposing the bill. If that means throwing him out of office, that means the person who runs against him might be in this room. Because if there are people who are getting in the way of black progress, even if they look like us, they gotta go. But you have to decide what that one thing is. I am more than willing to assist any way that I can, amplify the issue. We've been streaming this. We're going to actually restream this several times over the next week. More folks will learn about it. But you are the only people who can decide what happens with education in Sacramento. You. This is on you. And if he can get bites in Birmingham, and do understand, there are black parents in Birmingham right now who are fighting the Birmingham School Board who does not want charter schools. And the numbers of the black, if you think those numbers are bad, go see the education numbers of the black belt in Alabama. Will make this look like Rhodes Scholars. So you have to now decide, what are you going to do? Text number, what is it again?
52886.
52886. Share this, and they should be text 4 kids to number 4. For folks who want to participate, where should they go?
Yeah, the email address, RANTOINE@ccsa.org.
RAM.
RAN as in Nicholas.
RAN.
Yep. TOIN as in Nicholas @ccsa.org.
That's your email?
That's my email.
All right, Pastor?
Nan, N-A-N, Sacramento @gmail.com.
All right, when it comes to college preparedness?
hmahone@aol.com.
H, spell Mahone. Some folks ain't
Mahone.
spell it. Spell it.
HMAHONE.
At AOL.com.
That's right.
You're still using AOL.
I knew you were going to say that.
She ain't changed since 1994. She ain't like, I ain't getting no Hotmail, no Gmail. I ain't getting none of that.
But I have a Yahoo one. I'm just not giving you that.
And, of course, I run 3 black newspapers, so you guys support black newspapers. Where can they reach you?
That's right, Sacramento Observer. You see us online, www.sacobserver.com.
And don't forget, you can support us, Roland Martin Unfiltered. Go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can join our Bring the Funk fan club. We certainly appreciate that. And Margaret, if folks want to reach you, how can they do so?
They can reach me at fortuneschool.us.
Fortune School?
Singular.us.
.us. Y'all give it up for our panel. All right. Y'all that got to go home, y'all got to get out of here. Thanks a lot. We appreciate it. Hey, fam, want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered, the blackest show on all of digital, cable, and broadcast. Check out our audio podcast. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Press play.